Hi there everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I decided recently that it would be fun to review and rank Drake and Josh. Like my previous videos, I will review the episodes in chronological order and then give a ranking at the end. Now, let's get on with it. Alright, so I think above all else, this episode did a good job of establishing the two main characters and their personality types. Although, I do think the plot was a little all over the place. I appreciate that it was trying to set up the show, but it felt quite jumbled to me. I think the idea of Josh struggling to give advice as himself is a good idea for a plot, and I think they could have expanded upon it more. Even if the whole fight with Buck does come down to some kind of confidence plot. I feel like it was a bit mean-spirited of Drake to exploit Josh to get Tiffany. Especially with him inadvertently getting Josh into a fight with her psycho boyfriend. Although I do question Tiffany's overall character and what she seeks in a potential partner, as she seems to love poetry and physical violence towards someone else. I think the cold open was put to good use establishing this new family dynamic and organically introducing everyone, even though the rest of the family barely appear in this episode. I did really like the karate instructor. He's a good one-off character and seemed to relay the slapstick comedy of this show well. He just seemed crazy in the funniest possible way. I wish there was more scenes of him, to be honest. I think the ending was nice and shows the beginning of their dynamic. Drake pushing Josh to see that good advice comes from the person giving it and not the clothes that they wear. As nice as this is, I still think it would have had a bit more weight if Drake wasn't the reason that Josh got assaulted. I've actually given a more in-depth review of this episode in the past. Link will be in the description if you wish to watch. This was an alright introduction. It gave the audience a good taste of what the show will be. This one felt more cohesive than the other. So despite the title of the episode being Dune Buggy, I would argue that it's not that centric. More of a plot device to push the conflict forward. So here, Josh is jealous that Drake can get away with breaking the rules all the time, and he can't. Which is an interesting plot point. It would make sense for someone like Josh to clam up and panic at the thought of lying, let alone trying it. And that's what happens. Josh tries to lie about destroying the TV, but does a bad job of it and gets caught. This sets up the whole conflict for him, as he's stuck doing chores and isn't happy. Which segues nicely into Drake trashing the Dune buggy and getting badly injured. The rest of the plot is Drake attempting to cover it up from his parents. I did enjoy that Josh was able to get his own back at Drake, although I think the wrestling may have been a step too far. The speech he gave Drake is one of the best bits of dialogue from the whole show so far. I think it speaks a lot about their characters. I also really found Drake's friend Trevor amusing. I think the actor must have some charm though, as Trevor is non-existent as a character and is just dumb. That's his whole thing. A bit slow at parts, but a much stronger message. This was a decent watch. Wow, okay, this was a much better episode. So far, this has the tightest and most coherent plot. So right from the cold open, it establishes Susan as a presence on the show. In this case, as Drake's new girlfriend and highlights Josh's unease around her. Essentially, Susan plays Drake and Josh against each other. Whenever Drake isn't present, Susan flirts with Josh and comes onto him, which makes the very awkward Josh feel uncomfortable. Drake thinks he catches the two of them at it, except she makes the first move on Josh. This is essentially the whole conflict of the episode, but it does such a good job and slowly ramps up the pressure from scene to scene until the big reveal in the music video. Now, the catalyst of the whole plot is Drake and Josh recording a music video for a school project. But while they're making their video, Megan is secretly recording them. She highlights to their class embarrassing moments like Josh being in the bathtub. This is also good as she shows a clip of Susan flirting with Josh. The fact that the plot already established Megan was spying on them makes this conclusion all the better. I do like that this one fleshes Megan and the pranks out a lot more too. Again, nothing too much from the parents apart from a weird Animal Channel joke. This is the best of the season so far. It was a well written and entertaining plot. I was not a fan of this episode. Right, so I get the point that this episode was meant to be the boys taking on responsibilities, and that's great. It's a good concept and message for an episode of the show, but I don't feel like an awful lot happened here. Drake and Josh end up babysitting for their dad's boss. Megan then pulls a prank on them, which results in the baby crying. It's then just a montage of them calming the baby down. Drake goes to his gig afterwards and Josh thinks he's lost the baby. Again, it's just Megan taking him to scare the boys. It was just quite boring to sit through. I feel like there should have been more, and for the most part, this was the first bottle episode. The majority takes place in the house, but nothing much of interest happens here. I also found the mother of the baby to be quite an insufferable person. Every time she was on screen, I cringed. I liked that the boys weren't bickering and actually worked together on something. And for the first time so far, Drake seemed to be the more level-headed one, taking the lead as well. I think him abandoning the gig shows how much Josh means to him at this point. I didn't really like this one. It was clearly the weakest of the season so far. This was a fun one. So at first, it might seem like there's too many plot threads. You know, stuff like Drake trying to get a gig at a coffee shop, Josh failing to talk to a girl, and an actual snake. Somehow, this episode manages to tell a fun story with all of these elements and do it well. Josh likes this girl at his high school, but is struggling to speak to her without panicking and saying the wrong thing. After advice from his father and Drake, he tries to be himself and just talk to her, which leads to him lying and claiming he can play the guitar. I mean, this is a slight contradiction from the Dune Buggy episode, as he can't lie. But given the context of him liking this girl Kathy, it makes sense. Megan buys a pet snake, but it scares Walter, so she has to get rid of it. She decides to leave it in Drake's bag, where it disrupts Drake's audition at the coffee shop, leading to him getting banned. It's so dumb, but it's also really funny. Oh yeah, the incredible karate instructor from the pilot owns the coffee shop, so he graces our screens once again. That made me very happy. I think the ending is nice, even though I think Josh's collection of Kathy watercolour paintings is fairly creepy. Him just being himself worked out in the end. This was such a surprisingly good episode. I had a lot of fun with it, and it was one of the better watches of the season. So, I think the series ended on quite a strong note. So, this episode felt a lot more like a character piece than something that was very plot reliant. Drake and Josh think they're going to spend the weekend away from their parents so they can do whatever they like, until it's revealed that Josh's Grammy was going to be watching them. I like that this is the finale, as most episodes so far have had Josh reference his grandmother in some way, so it's nice for her to appear in the flesh. Drake wants to go to this concert with his friends, but his parents and step-grandmother won't let him go. He's annoyed, but ultimately doesn't think he'll be able to get tickets for it anyway. Josh's Grammy feels bad about her treatment of Drake, and said if he can beat her at basketball, he can hang out with his friends so long as it's not the concert. I like this a lot, especially as she does seem overly cruel to him at the start. Even if he isn't the best person, she lets him win and he goes. At the last minute, he gets fake tickets and tries to go to the concert, but is stopped. She has to pay a large fine for him not to be arrested. They have one more basketball game to decide whether or not he has to tell his parents. She wipes the floor with him, so he has to tell, even though she stops him at the last minute. This plot has a very basic premise, but I think it does a lot for Drake's character. I think this is the most real he has felt this whole season. The last conversation he has with Grammy at the end is great. This feels like such a feel-good episode of the show to watch. Definitely a better one, very much enjoyed. Here's my ranking of the season. Overall, I felt like this was a much stronger season than I thought, with more standouts than I was expecting. Well, that's just my thoughts. I would love to hear what you all think in comments down below. If you enjoyed what you saw, could you please hit that like button and subscribe? It will help the channel continue to grow. Please stay close as I try to post new content as often as possible.